I am so profoundly honored to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you for taking the time and sharing this with me. This has been such an incredibly significant and special experience. I've learned so much. I've been welcomed by so many incredibly generous, creative, innovative, advocating humans. Just I can't say how honored I am. Thank you for being here. Okay, so this presentation is really going to give you kind of a narrative arc of how I became a curator, what my curatorial praxis is heading towards, so what shaped me, where I'm heading, and I would love it if you would interject, ask questions later, and if you need me to speak up, just go like this, or slow down, which is probably actually going to happen, just be like, shut. Okay, so let's get started. Visual anthropologist, exhibition maker, which is a term I've named myself this, and I proclaim this really proudly. And then curator of craft art and design. I specialize in post-war and contemporary, so 1945 to present. And I also am an art writer. I write for magazines sometimes. I do lots of kind of commissioned catalog essays. I'm not going to delve too deeply into that part of my life. Okay, so visual anthropology. I started my undergraduate experience as a maker. I was an assistant in the theater costume shop, and that was my work study job all through college. I made garments all growing up. Both of my parents are creatives, come from an artistic family, and I kind of entered art history through the back door of the fine arts department, and I ended up apprenticing under a professor in the anthropology department who really wanted an art historical maker lens on the field work they were doing. This was off the coast of Georgia, the state, and they were uncovering all of this incredible kind of material culture from this site, and they wanted some art historians and people who are kind of used to analyzing objects to help them figure out how certain things were made. So here you can see we are doing experimental archaeology. We're trying to figure out how some of the kind of architectonic features and walls were woven. So we were physically weaving in this space and trying to figure out how some of these things were built. We actually got written up in the New York Times. Techniques, Skills Unveiled. I just love that title. So we were doing dugout canoes. I was mostly focused on fibers and textiles, and that kind of honed in this interest in examining the material culture of our world through kind of a social lens. Then comes my graduate experience. I went to Oxford specifically to study under Marcus Banks and do a thesis that was really based on this man, Alfred Gell's theories about art and anthropology. And what he is positing is that art objects, all of the paintings in here, are agents in our social fabric. They're not passive things just to be admired and looked at for their, analyzed and looked at for their kind of aesthetic qualities, but they really are pushing into our social fabric in a really, active way. And so that was really exciting to me. Thinking about art as a technology in our culture that is, I feel that all the time when I'm in a space that's really intentionally designed, where there are artists who are working on developing the experience. It feels much different than being in a kind of corporate space, right? And so I was really interested in thinking about that kind of through an art historical lens. So Alfred Gell's theory really starts with him examining this Trobriand Islands canoe, and it has this incredible carving on the front, this incredible adornment, shells. It's like this really dazzling display, especially when it's on the water and it's kind of refracting all of the light off of the land and the water and the sky. And what he says is that in this context, it was a war vessel. It was almost this disorienting feature of the canoe. So people who would come upon it would just be like disoriented, freaked out, maybe on the water, hadn't kind of, a little dehydrated perhaps, and then they're starting to, it has this other function, right? It's disorienting the opposing, the warring enemy in this case. So he uses this as an example, but then traces it all the way up to contemporary art and Rothko and like art objects that move us or have an emotive technology and are really pushing back into the social fabric. So that was so exciting to me. This is a show I just opened a few days ago, like the day before I flew to Hawaii. It is a solo exhibition of Roberto Lugo, and he is a really celebrated ceramic artist. And what he's known for doing is borrowing all of these references from the art historical canon, but recasting the figures who are painted on the sides. So we have a Greco-Roman amphora, but it's a Selena concert on the side, or it's Dennis Rodman and Tupac and Biggie, and so kind of inserting cultural figures who may not have, been on such kind of elaborate, been kind of commemorated in this kind of way. So what I think this work is doing is, it is visually stunning. It has all of the kind of complexities of the iconography, of the painting, the mastery of the skill, but it's also making us question who's included in the canon, who gets put in museums, what histories are remembered, and why. So I see a pretty clear connection between this work. One of the first projects I did in graduate school under a professor was called the Great Box Project. I worked at the Pitt Rivers Art Museum, this one on the very right photo. And this museum is bizarre. It's a museum about museums. It's like a time capsule. It's very meta, and it's like, this is the way in which humans developed ontologies, figured out, tried to create bodies of knowledge. They got all these objects from all around the world and tried to make sense of them. They put them in order. They tried to figure out who was the most civilized. Very fraught. And what we were doing as the kind of contemporary voice in that space was saying, this is how they did it. This is why that was an unfounded way to approach material culture. And so we were kind of inserting contemporary didactics in that space. The Pitt Rivers Museum?
What?
The Pitt Rivers Museum. It's bizarre, yeah.
Where is it?
It's in the UK. It's in Oxford, right outside of London. And so they have these incredible collections from all over the world. This is a Haida box from the Pacific Northwest indigenous community, and what Laura, my professor, was interested in was, one, repatriating some of these objects back to the communities they came from, and two, making sure the communities had access to the objects. So we brought two master Haida craftsmen, carvers particularly, to come study the original box, and then meticulously work with us to figure out what kind of pigments they were using, how they carved it, and they kind of recreated it piece by piece, panel by panel. They were there for a couple of months. And then that object went back to the Haida Nation and is used as a kind of a teaching object in carving schools and in craft contexts. And then we're still working on getting the original piece back there, but it's kind of one step forward. So it was really interesting work. So how did I bridge that kind of context to what I'm doing now? This is me inside of an exhibition I curated of Georgina Trevino, who is a contemporary art jeweler. She lives in Tijuana. She's on the border, kind of remixing the material culture of the US-Mexico border and reframing it and kind of what she's really done in this show, which I'll talk about in a minute, we'll go a little bit deeper, is she's cast all of these places, the pawn shop, the line to go across the border, playgrounds, all of these kind of iconic spaces and nostalgic spaces in a jewelry language. So everything is kind of cast in silver or blinged out. She turns kind of license plates into cast silver adornments. And so I wanted to show you what I'm working on now, and kind of why craft. So I'm the chief curator at Houston Center for Contemporary Craft, which is a Kunsthalle. We do not have a collection. And what's so wonderful about that is that we can be very responsive to things that are going on. We don't have to, be tethered to a collection. And craft felt like this natural discipline for me to come into with all of my background. I define craft as any creative output that pays particular attention to process, materiality, skill, and tradition. I like this expansive definition because I like playing with what I can get away with, including in craft, and using craft as a lens to look at contemporary culture. So I'm going to show you a few of the shows I've done that I'm proud of, and this is one. This is in Philadelphia in a former technical high school. It had just closed, and it was one of the few remaining kind of school environments that was teaching handicraft and hand skills. And the artist community kind of really rallied around saving the building. It's now, we found an angel investor who bought the building, and it's now filled with artists. There's a glass blowing studio, there's jewelry collectives, there's a lot of incredible people making wonderful work in this space still. So before all of that happened, I wanted to stage an exhibition in there, and this was for the American Craft Council. This is their Emerging Voices Award winners. So we have Raven Half Moon in here, we have Lucy Jockle, Marissa Finos. It was a really incredible show. It was also in the women's gym, which was amazing because it was all femme identifying artists. This is another show that I did in a commercial context. This was at Spring Break Art Fair in New York City. They staged this art fair during freeze, and it's whatever commercial buildings are up for lease and are just empty at the moment, they fill it with curators and artists. So we don't actually know what the space is going to be like until like the week of. This was in the Calvin Klein offices, and so there was still desk furniture that was just filled with kind of detritus from this kind of corporate work environment. And I got an office that was filled with a bank of windows. So I needed to figure out how to invent wall space, wall hanging space, how to deal with this crazy, terrible fluorescent lighting and checkerboard floor. So this is showing some of the ways I've used kind of costume and theater design in my exhibition, my approach to exhibition making. So we used theater scrim to kind of diffuse the light, and kind of suspended all of the work from monofilament, and then covered the floor, which it was a great thing actually, because this show is about grid work, and the grid is the foundation of weaving and Werner Werkstätte and all of these kind of wonderful craft and design movements. So the grid actually worked. Here's some examples. And so this is where I am now. I went off and I worked at Corning Museum of Glass for 2 years. I oversaw the galleries at the Center for Craft in Asheville. And now I'm in Houston, down the street from one of the best collections of international contemporary craft and design at the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. And our building is even better. Please come visit. I want to just plug how incredible the community is here. It was built for artists and to advocate for creative practice, living artists. So you enter through our craft garden. We work with a botanist to grow making materials, basket making materials, paper making materials, natural dyes. We do indigo dyes with the community. We host ceramic exhibitions in the space. People are constantly, asking if they can cut our bamboo for a show. So it's a really active, beautiful space, and I love that the first place you start in the experience of the museum is at the raw material. We also have an urban beehive on our roof, and they pollinate this craft garden, and we sell their honey. And the urban beekeeper said that they're the happiest bees in Houston. And then we also have of course, our gallery space. I just mounted an exhibition with Sonia Clark, kind of spanning 3 decades of her work in fiber, hair, sculpture, community practice. And what was so wonderful about this show is that we had 2 installations where the community was invited to help make the art. So we had 3 looms that were weaving these scrolls on the side, and they are weaving the waffle weave pattern for the truce flag that ended the Civil War. So when people came in, they learned how to weave on a loom, and they contributed to this incredible growing body of art that is traveling around the world. We have Detroit, Atlanta, New York City, all kind of represented in those scrolls. So it was really beautiful to be able to add to that. And then we have an artist residency program. These are 2 of our most recent alumni. We have Benga Komolafi and Terumi Saito, and they've just gone on to do amazing things. What I love about our residency is that it's not media specific. So they collaborate all of the time. Terumi is a backstrap weaver. She ended up working in ceramics and doing backstrap weaving down the side of ceramic vessels. Benga started kind of pushing his work into a really sculptural dimension, and then ended up showing at the Whitney Biennial. So it's a really generative space. I just designed this modular wall to exhibit their work so that they can also sell. So what I wanted to show through those slides was just how holistic the approach to exhibiting craft is in this space. It's really kind of like from farm to table, from raw material to making to final presentation to selling, and like acknowledging that selling work and getting work collected in museums is such an integral part of being sustaining an artist career. So I'm really excited now to talk about curating in this broader context, considering architecture, considering community programming, considering all of these other facets, and how they can instigate new ways of thinking about art for the public. So this is a project I did with Tiff Massey, a Detroit jeweler, and this body of work was thinking about 80s hip hop jewelry in Detroit and kind of the blinginess and stunting through the city, and how these kind of monumental chains signified communities that you belong to, power, it almost like a mask, like you put it on and you feel more powerful just when you're walking through the city. So we designed the exhibition together. We had mirrors so people could kind of see themselves in the work. We also had these points where portraiture would meet the jewelry. So it was kind of like trying to force people to have essentially forcing perspective. So we had this narrow pathway through that you can see here. This is walking through the pathway. These are monumental versions of rings that she designed in steel. And then this is another project I did in Houston. I got a grant to explore artists who were carrying on the legacy of postmodern architects who are designing ceramics, furniture, and doing this really kind of experimental, radical Memphis design stuff in the 70s, and we're still doing it today. So I applied to stage an exhibition of their work inside of 3 kind of significant postmodern buildings. This is one in the Mesa by Architectonica. This is another one in a John Altram building on Rice's campus. So kind of interjecting into spaces that are not necessarily institutional art spaces. And then it ended up traveling to another museum. And then this is the first show since I've come back to Houston. This is called Ripstop, and this is a solo exhibition of Max Adrian, and Max really gained all of these sewing hand skills, pattern making skills when he was working in a mascot factory. And he kind of translated those skills into his artistic practice. And when you walk into this space, all of these sculptures are flaccid. And there's motion sensors that activate when you walk in, so they welcome you, so they all kind of mess and say hello to you when you walk in. So it kind of looks like that when you walk in. And then here is a kind of wider picture of the Georgina exhibition. She encrusted a fountain that you would find in a piazza in Mexico City and in Tijuana, with jewelry from swap meets and jewelry that was donated to her by people that live on the border. So instead of creating a mosaic on the side, it was all jewelry. So, you know, it was so incredible seeing the water kind of refract and bounce off of all of these kind of gems and chains. In the background, you can see there is a swing set. Those are made of nameplate necklaces that she's blown up to monumental scale. And then here she made her own penny press machine, so she embossed the plates, and you could engrave your wish and throw it into the fountain. She collected all of the wishes at the end. You can see some details. This is a view of inside of the pawn shop. That mask on the right was worn by Bad Bunny. So I touched a mask that was on Bad Bunny's face, which was incredible. And all of these objects were hand carved. You can see the Carnita signs. She's translating kind of hand painted signage that's on taco trucks and all over this one city that ended up being kind of like whitewashed by the public works, like the civil works in the city. They ended up painting over all of the hand-painted signs. So she did this documentary project where she went around, took photos of all of it, and then carved it in wax, and then you can see it in silver here. Okay, so what does being an exhibition maker mean? I wanted to show you, in the museum that I work at, I am very involved in all elements of it. It's not just choosing the objects, I'm also installing them, doing exhibition design, helping with fabrication. So I wanted to show you a little bit about like what a day in the life is like. So it usually starts as something like this, like a spreadsheet, and trying to comb through tiny thumbnails of objects and draw out thematics that are really profound. And then reflect all of that information onto a floor plan. We use all accessible exhibition design guidelines, make sure that everybody can kind of see it and access the work. And then it's hand drawn, then I kind of do like a rudimentary sketch of the gallery. And this is what I keep showing this slide because I want our director to invest in a model maker. This is at the Manila collection. They have, I think it's 1 to 12 scale versions of every single gallery in their museum. They're on casters, and they have a dedicated staff member who's an artist who makes miniature versions of every work in their collection.
Where is this?
This is in Houston at the Minnow collection. It's incredible. Please, if you're ever in town, you must visit this. And they actually have these lenses that you can clip onto the edge of the galleries, and it shows you what it's like at scale. So you can see what the lighting's like. You can adjust all of those things physically on the model. But this is what I use, which is a version of SketchUp and CAD and InDesign. This was me figuring out how many strips of silver laminate paper we needed for this show to make all of the walls reflective. And then this is a kind of campus map of a show I curated called Designing Motherhood. I adapted a version of this exhibition. And then I kind of go through, and there's like this kind of larger scale flow, and then I'll go in and do every single wall, make sure that it's like everything's spaced out as I want. So I wanted to talk about a couple of shows that I have been pushing my methodology and framework to really redefine what a craft experience is, what the experience of, what does a craft gallery look like? We know what a modernist art gallery looks like, the white cube model, right? But for me, that feels so divorced from what actually experiencing craft is like. It's tactile, it's warm, it's there's some relation to functionality and touch and community, and it feels, you know, plopping jewelry, for instance, onto a pedestal where nobody can touch it or feel it. All of those things are really difficult for me.
Are you going to be here for the installation of this show?
I wish, but we've been talking a lot about how we want to install it. So how am I trying to push that? I've been experimenting with a few exhibitions that are really pushing the boundaries of what craft can mean today. So craft as caregiving, craft as art handling, craft as choreography. So one example of this was my Designing Motherhood show. I kind of pulled out all of these tenets of craft, right? Prioritizing ancestral wisdom, material intelligence, learning by doing. It's time and labor intensive. There's a slowness. It's collaborative often. And it's also involves skill that is passed down for generations. And all of these things felt so aligned with experiences that I've read about of being a parent or a caregiver. This is one of my favorite quotes about craft. Craft is a performative gesture of collective skill. And this is my favorite breakdown of this. Whenever people come into our space, they ask how long it took X to make. And I like to, you know, the short answer is 2 hours and like 300,000 years or whatever. But it's like, you know, 2 hours to throw it. It took a long time to dry and not crack. And then I fired it like 3 times to get that really awesome glaze you're obsessed with. And then there were 1,000 pots before this pot that were uneven, blew up in the kiln. I dropped, even if it was perfect, you know. And then several generations of people working on honing that technical and material knowledge before me. This quote, "Labor is my medium," was something that I was really drawing from when I was thinking about the motherhood exhibition. And the original show was based off of this book that was published by MIT Press, and they showed it in a medical history museum context and in a purely design context. So things like nursery bottles or IUDs or monitorers. And what I really wanted to inject was the hand and craft into the show. So I wrote to the curators, Michelle Miller-Fisher, Amber Winnick, and asked if they would be open to me expanding the exhibition and focusing it on craft. And they were super down, and we developed it together. So it was everything from kind of handmade rattles and pregnancy prototype garments to hand-woven delivery blankets and hand-crocheted lactation feeding kits that are made by midwives, and baby carriers, which are used all over the world and look very different, made of many different materials. And then, of course, there's contemporary artists like Allison Carney Moses, whose incredible piece, My Belly, was in the show. And it's actually from a series called My Black Body. And this piece is so incredibly, it's so incredibly skilled, right? It's all of these bent pieces, you know, steam bent pieces of wood, tracing the contour of her pregnant belly. But what's so beautiful about it to me is there's all of these striations on the front. It's like splitting apart when you look at it. And she told me that it was based on her experience of giving birth, and all of the muscles in her abdomen split apart. She had to have corrective surgery. And now she walks around and she feels the pull in her body every time she moves of her giving birth to a new life. And it changed her body forever and the way she experiences her body forever. And then this piece on the right, Amy Corin, she dried her breast milk, and it was like in powder form. Then she set it in resin beads. And what I love thinking about it in a jewelry context is, you often think about the most valuable materials, right? Gemstones, mother of pearl, And for me, I think juxtaposing that with something made of breast milk, which is life-giving, ephemeral. You know, all of these things, it's hard to learn how to get sometimes. It takes practice. I think that was such a beautiful juxtaposition for me in terms of the material. This is a piece by Sung Lee called The Sleep Blanket. He knitted this baby blanket for his son, and it's a data visualization of the first year of his son's sleep patterns. So every line is one day, and you can see how erratic it is at the beginning, and then it kind of evens out towards the end. And then this is his son sleeping in the blanket. And what was so great about this was that we had to get the son's permission because he still uses this blanket all the time. And he was like, I don't know if I can give you that blanket for like 5 months. That's a long time. This is a piece by Corey Ackelmeyer. These are all hand-forged links of silver soldered with gold. Each one represents one day in her now almost 6-year-old child's life. And in mass, they have this kind of like glowing halo effect. But here you can see her notebook where she's tracking time and how many links. And you know, whenever I do studio visits with craft artists, I always see their notebooks looking similar to this, right? Tracking what glaze recipes worked, how much time you were in the studio. So that was another really beautiful kind of analog between craft and parenting. Another show that I did where I was kind of trying to push what could be considered craft was this Side Up. And this is a show that is really framing art handling, and that's everything from crate building to mount making to physically installing and lighting artwork within the kind of lens of craft. I was an art handler for many years, and what I noticed was that almost every art handler I worked with was a super skilled craftsperson and artist in their own right. And they often made the whole thing happen. Like, the artist would come in and be like, I just want it to like float and just like, you know, look like it's illuminated. And we'd be like, do you have a mount? No. Do you know how do you want to do that? No. Can you figure it out? So there's this kind of like material sensibility and kind of problem solving that I feel like is really key to craftsmanship that was really present in art handling. So what I wanted to do with this show was really kind of turn an exhibition inside out. So it looked like it was in the process of being built, like the walls were almost like in the process of being built. I actually matched all of the wall colors to like the cardboard color side of a drywall and then the plaster side of drywall, but it's all kind of, it's an illusion. We didn't actually break into the wall. But yeah, so what it does is kind of trace an object's journey from the studio into the crate, into the art space, and kind of the bowels of the museum industrial complex where conservators and registrars look at it, and then it goes on view. So I wanted to show you a little bit of background. One of the artists in this exhibition, Vivian Chu, whose incredible work you can see here, I just wanted to give you a sense of how long it took this show to kind of foment. I had been thinking about this show for a long time. I was in touch with kind of commercial crate builders, and I ran into Vivian at a furniture conference, and I told her about this show, and she was like, no way, I just inherited an enormous amount of crates from Wing on Wong Company, the oldest continuously operating storefront in Chinatown in New York. And I'm about to make a bunch of artwork with it. And I was like, and about shipping and migration and all of these things. And I was like, no way, this is nuts. And so what she had been trying to do was, you know, cooper the work, so steam bend planks of wood into a vessel shape. And so she was trying to mimic the porcelain, the shapes of the porcelain that were once held in the crates and carried across on ships into the US with the wood itself. But it was so damaged and, you know, termites, waterlogged, everything that you can imagine. And it's pine, so it's not, you know, it's not a really precious wood. So she had to literally invent her own process of making this work. This is her in the studio, measuring out every angle, then kind of angle cutting each piece, gluing the sides together, and then gluing the whole kind of thing in the round together. Not using computers or CAD or anything. This is all like hand measured, incredible work. And so that first Zoom call was the first one that she finished, and she was like proud of it, and we were like, yes, it happened, you did it. So we were the first institution to show this body of work, which was really special. And I wanted to show all of Wing on Loan Company's archival images of them sourcing porcelain and Xinjiang and Hong Kong, and all of the pictures of the crates. I wanted to show it alongside of it. So I went there, we got a bunch of photos, we looked through everything, and Vivian, while I was there, asked me to source all of the stands that are hand-carved rosewood stands while I was there. And we ended up using them in the show. This is kind of what it looked like when I was figuring out, do I want to show them kind of like looking like they just came off of a cargo ship, like in a pile, or do I want them to look like they're on pedestals that are made of the crates? This is me figuring that out. This was the final presentation. The second artist I reached out to was Adam Manley. Adam is known for making hyper-specific crates and reliquaries for objects. And he had just started this body of work called From the Vault, where he was making hyper-specific, like meticulous, tedious crates for mundane objects that like don't need to be crated, as a commentary on, you know, what we value, what gets this kind of like, princess treatment through space and time and is cared for in perpetuity, right? And so he started collecting tools from behind the scenes in museums. This is the lead preparator at the MFA Boston's hammer, and he actually like shaped the handle so it fit his hand perfectly. He was there forever. We had some hand painted tape measures from preparators. I think those were from Racine. And he was a painter, and so he painted all of them with these like beautiful oil paintings because people kept stealing his tape measures. And so I went cross country and picked up all of these beautiful birch crates that were so gorgeous. It was like such a joke because we would never put those in the mail, right? Like normally the crates are just meant to be banged around, but they were so gorgeous. And then we had an artist named John Pauhida who sculpted these art handler legs with a cleat, so it looks like when you can hang artwork on it, and it looks like it's being held by an art handler. So again, trying to kind of bring attention to all of the invisible labor that makes art happen, that makes museum spaces happen. The last artist that was in this, that I kind of commissioned site-specific work for this show from was Willem de Haan, based in the Netherlands. And I knew this body of work. Actually, I should also preface this, all of the artists in this show have worked as art handlers or art assistants and have been involved in installing artwork as well. He is a famous art handler in the Netherlands and in Western Europe, and he was asked to do a solo show, and the curator sent him this hand-drawn version, was like, can you just fill up this basement space? It's about this big. And they let him do anything. What he showed up with that day was a clay version of her drawing at scale on these like hyper-specific pedestals. And so when I approached him about doing something for the show, he asked me to send all of my drawings and all of the kind of like behind-the-scenes labor stuff. And then this is him in the space before anybody else got there, making a grid so he could do a scale version of drawings and in clay on the ground, and then also build this tape measuring curtain. So again, kind of poking fun. You could put something under there and measure the space around it. But yeah, just and then it has like infinite openings and like infinite possibilities of how you can kind of carve out the open space. But the kind of extended community reach that I wanted to do for this show is really special. We hosted frame making workshops with framers at the various museums in town. And then when all of the artists were there for install, I got all these behind the scenes tours for them of conservation labs, and kind of other prep rooms at the Museum of Fine Arts and the Manil and the Contemporary Arts Museum, and here they are all geeking out about like tools that they had. And then the last two things that I wanted to bring up, we also produced a credit wall, and I wanted to show the kind of like last punch before you left the show was how many hands it takes to put a show on, and really usually to make a great piece of work or any kind of installation. But you know, everybody from the fabricators, the framers, the shippers, anybody who translated, graphic design, like anybody who touched the show, I just wanted to show the immense amount of labor it took. And that we have continued doing after this show. So that was something that came out of the show that we're still doing, and kind of making sure that people in the museum space that are normally invisible get credit for their labor. And then Art Handling Olympics. It was something that happened in the late 2010s in New York City, and it was a bunch of kind of really riotous, wily art handlers who got together and wanted to make up all of these Olympic events and compete with each other. And some of them included holding like a cast 2-ton steel painting all together and then having a curator yell at them to move it like 1 centimeter left or right. And just really funny things like that. So we hosted the first version in Texas, and we came up with similarly ridiculous events, one of which was making a crate out of scrap pile, like recyclables, for a piece of porcelain, and then we threw it off the roof, and we graded them based on the packing style and then like what survived. So again, the kind of like broader extent of like what an exhibition can be. It can be fun, it can be community driven, it can be playful. And this is a show that I haven't done yet, but I wanted to give you kind of a peek behind the process of what I'm thinking about. This one is kind of doing something similar, but framing choreography and showing how kind of embodied movement is so inherent to every craft discipline. The kind of skilled way that you move your body to, you know, to shave wood down or to blow glass, where you need to be kind of in choreographed movement with other people. And kind of drawing out those similarities. So some of the works that I'm thinking about are the B team, who actually worked with choreographers in New York City in the 90s and did glass dances. So, you know, glass blowing is like the perfect example where you have a whole gaff team, you cannot blow glass alone, you have to be in synchronized movement, sharing breath with, you know, with your colleagues to make it happen. But here you can see the kind of like dancerly streams of molten glass and, you know, them working together. This is a piece by Lodi Cardus, who's an art jeweler, and I love this piece. It's a giant room-sized pearl necklace, and it only becomes the pearl necklace when the dancers fill the pods and do this great dance. And this is a piece by Hannah Gartside, who's a wonderful fiber artist, but she started her career as a choreographer. And when she transitioned to making objects, she started making these kinetic objects that kind of blew around and made these kind of ripples and kind of forms through movement, and very inspired by her choreographic work. And all of this kind of came about because of this lecture I gave at the Baltimore Jewelry Center called Making Moves, and thinking about the quality of jewelry and adornment in particular, where it's always collaborating with the body, which is in movement. So it is like a choreographic work of art. You're carrying it around, the way you wear it on your body, the way the lei is, where the way I'm moving it and gesticulating wildly because I'm Sicilian. All of those things, it brings choreography into the work. And I was tracing that kind of practice from Black Mountain College, where we have Merce Cunningham, Ruth Asawa taking dance classes from Merce Cunningham, making work about dance and dance motifs, and then making insanely beautiful wire sculptures that we know today. And then this is her granddaughter, who is a dancer, who also collaborates with fiber and does like fiber performance. And then we of course have Rauschenberg, who also works with Merce Cunningham to make these kind of fiber extensions of the body to highlight the dancers' bodies, which I felt like has such a interesting connection when you think about somebody like Marjorie Schick, legendary art jeweler, and her body of work called Choreographing the Object in the 70s, where she's working with dancers and putting her jewelry on these dancers and seeing how it moves through space. And then there are these examples of dance theaters commissioning jewelers and artists to make work and costumes for their productions. So here we have Art Smith, who was making jewelry for the Marchant Dance Theater in Pearl Primus, and I think it totally influenced his work and the kind of balance and movement in his pieces. And then we have legendary Nick Cave, who was a former Alvin Ailey dancer, and then starts making these sound suits that are activated by movement, and he's still working with dancers to kind of bring those pieces to life. So this is just the start. I'm like gathering all of these examples that I'm noticing and kind of trying to make sense of it in a broader context. And hopefully that will be a show that's filled with a season of dance in the exhibition. And I'll leave it there for questions. Thank you all so much. Any burning questions or riddles?
How long does it take for average, more or less, exhibition to be from the moment of yes, do it, to the opening?
It's a great question.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, how long does it take from kind of conception to a final exhibition? How long does the planning take? A long time, yeah.
1,000 years.
Yes. So for us, we're on a calendar of about like 3 years out. But some of these shows, like the art handling show, I pitched that show like 7 years ago. And it just didn't have the right home yet. And I'm glad that it didn't happen earlier because there were so many amazing new bodies of work that were included. So I think sometimes show ideas find the right institutional home later on. Like, anyway, that's my personal philosophy about it, because sometimes I talk to curators who are like, I've been working on this show for forever, and it's like it's not getting, picked up by my institution. They don't want to support it. And I'm like, you just haven't found the right place. Like, I was doing shows in my apartment, in motels, like literally anywhere I could hang artwork and like not get arrested. That was like that was what I was like that was the vibe I was trying to bring into showing artwork anywhere. I don't know if that answered that question.
When you're in an institution as grand as the one that you're in, do you feel hemmed in by, you need some conservative ones and then you can give them something, like make them feel edgy about it? Like how do you navigate that tradition with these crazy ideas that you have?
That is such a good question, and yes, we do. We have to.
Temper it, right?
Yeah, there has to be a balance in the calendar. So I have an exhibitions committee that I present all of these ideas to, and like right now we have a juried open call exhibition. There has to be a balance in the calendar so that all forms of craft are like given space and time. And yeah, so there has to be a good balance. I make sure, I should include an image of our exhibition calendar. I divide everything by like media, kind of like artist career stage, so I can make sure there's a balance. So I'm kind of like tracking that as I go.
When you finish up a show, there's probably a post-mortem afterwards. What do you look for as measures of success?
I love that this is a great question. Well, it's funny, okay, so after designing Motherhood, which was a couple of years in the making, I kept saying to people I felt like I had a baby, and the gestational period for that baby was longer than like a human child. Because I'm like, we were hosting like listening sessions, meeting with parents, OBGs, like anybody in the community who was interested in, or would listen. And the metrics for success for, I think, you know, we measure like number of visitors through the door, number of visitors who come to specific events or come back, repeat visitors. We also measure, you know, how many write-ups did it get? Did it get any like critical reception or writing, you know, in publications? For me, I think the anecdotal, like people, I still have people who write to me and send me emails. Like I would say I get one every 2 months asking me when the next art handling Olympics is going to be. And we had people fly in from different states to compete. We had people from all over Texas who came. Like that really resonated with the community in a way that like was unexpected. I just wanted to kind of do it because I thought it was funny. And like the response to that has been very interesting. We actually had some people apply to a facilities role at the museum because of that show. They were like, I would never have come to this museum if not for that show. Like a bunch of my friends wanted to come, and then you made me think about it, and I think it's cool here. So yeah, different metrics of success.
How did you approach jurying the local material?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Well, I would like to thank Hawaiʻi Craftsmen once again for organizing such a not grueling but intense whirlwind trip that was super informative and connecting me with so many regional hosts, like hosts in each place that were kind of giving me this lens that I would not have had otherwise into like what they think the art scene is, what's special about their city, what's special about the work that's happening there. So all of that, like I was totally absorbing and thinking about while I was assessing the work. And I keep saying this, but I was absolutely blown away at the rigor of the kind of like technical virtuosity of craftsmanship that I saw in these applications. It was so impressive. But yeah, so everything from like, why am I coming back to that piece like 3 times and thinking about it? That obviously that's an indicator that there's something resonant in the work. To just being astounded and like agog at the fact that somebody used every single part of a coconut and like was able to like pull out all of those fibers and make something so intricate and beautiful. Like it was kind of all of those reactions. And then of course I was also pulling out themes as I went along, you know, like, oh, it says really interesting, there's a lot of people thinking about X, or, you know, that would be a really interesting grouping with that other piece I saw. Yeah, I hope that answered it. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of obnoxious, but, so, you know, you kind of condensed down your definition of craft down to 4 words, approximately, or actually, exactly 4 words. What were maybe the total 10 that you came up with, and which ones did you not include?
Wait, what? Hold on, wait. The 10 words I came up with?
Yeah, you probably reduced, you know, okay, I've got to define this.
Okay.
So you probably did a reductive process
Yes,
of saying,
yes,
okay,
yes.
these things came down. What were the words that didn't make the cut?
Okay, what did I have? I had like skill sharing, time. What were the words I had? Process, materiality, tradition. Yeah, things that didn't make the process. Didn't make the cut. Kind of intuition with material, like knowing a material so incredibly well that you can figure out how to problem solve or innovate or like come up with the tool you need to do the thing. Like that kind of, I don't know what the
So
word
out of
is.
curiosity, I'm going to kind of don't
Yeah.
belong here. So why did that word not get
Why did it not get there?
in there?
Well, I mean, to me, those tenets, I can apply those to anything that I'm looking at, and I'm like, is this addressing, like, I really think those capture it, if I'm being honest. I think that those, to me, that's my working definition, that's how I approach it, and I think it's really helpful for me to have parameters like that I can, like, look back at and be like, like, this work has X, but it's not very well made. Like, the concept's super interesting, but it's like, the way it's rendered is just like really sloppy, and that feels antithetical to craftsmanship to me, for example.
So kind of playing off on that, so, you know, there are pieces that are gonna rely more on the concept in some way. That being said, how do you feel about artist statements? Like, is it something that's absolutely necessary, even though sometimes the work speaks for itself? Or do you feel like sometimes a little bit of mystery is okay? I know it's gonna be different for each curator.
Well, I actually think it's different for each piece, and okay, so like I have things that I'm looking for when I approach any work, right? Like what you asked, like, is this well made? Can I tell that there's like some technical skill, like attention to materiality, process, blah, blah, blah. Does it meet all of those? If it does, that's like 10 out of 10 just in this column, but it's like, does it have an incredible concept? Is it making me think? Is it like changing the way I think? All of those are like, if it hits across 10 out of 10 in all of those columns, that's like the best piece of art of all time to me. It's like, it's super, like Vivian's work for me does that. It's like, it's really strong conceptually. It's creating this analog between migration and like, you know, family lineage and objects and stewardship and care, like all of these things. But they're also insanely, incredibly made. Like, she invented that faceting technique. So for that, like that example, that hits on all cylinders. That's like 10 out of 10. But sometimes, like, the concept is so compelling and the work is really gestural, maybe it's not there yet, or like, it's not the point of it to be rendered super well and intricately, and that's great too. Like, there are a lot of works that I love that are like that. So it just depends. Yeah, and artist statements, sometimes they're really helpful for context. And like the best, we talked a lot about artist statements on Hawaii, I think. And if you can keep it in your own voice and out of like art vernacular jargon, like word salad, where you're just like, it's juxtaposing, blah, 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 you know, whatever. The more that you can keep it in your own voice, the stronger usually for me the application is. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what they're trying to do. You don't have to like it does not need to be overwrought or really mysterious, you know?
Can I just ask, so just staying in the context of what we were just talking about, to connect the art that you experienced here with these concepts of how it speaks to you, and how profound it can become. Last night at dinner, my like heart stopped when you started to talk about these shells and hummingbird kind of thing. So can we talk about a specific piece of art that you experienced during the exhibition? Is that right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like that's a relatable?
Yeah, I think that's a good example. There was one piece that I encountered that was like making puka shells like more monumental out of ceramic, and then they were all kind of imprinted, and it was like supposed to be almost like an impression of a body laying on a mattress, and then it had flame worked neon shell that was kind of in like a pendulum over it with a motor. And like, it was a compelling piece of work just in the way it was presented, right? Like, I think every single piece of it I thought was well crafted. And then the way it was presented was like, it took me aback. I wasn't used to seeing something like that. A lot of times I'll be like, oh, I've seen lots of work that is like presented in this same kind of way, or it's of this tradition, which doesn't make it, but it struck me, it was something unusual. But then it was also thinking about the shell as this temporary home for a body and how it's like shifting, and you change shells maybe, or maybe you're, you know, thinking about a temporary home or a transient home, or what does home mean to you? And then also the kind of cultural significance of shells in this place and how they are used to commemorate, you know, they were used as currency, they're used to commemorate, you know, important familial lineages, all of the, like, that for me hit on all of the cylinders, right? Like, it was bringing in all of these references, it was super well made and technical, and it made me stop and think.
How about some advice? What is, we are, like, you know, we're all, you know, want to be artists, and like, when from you're dealing with artists out in the regular world, what works?
Okay, well, I mean, I think,
I mean, similar to like just saying your advice about a statement is awesome. It's like, say it like you're talking to your mom.
yeah, actually the best way to write a statement I found is to like go explain the elevator pitch of what you're doing to a friend, or like somebody who's like not in the art world, who is like, what do you mean? Well, you know, and just like say it plainly, and it can help you like hone in on what you're actually trying to articulate without all of the nonsense. But I think if you can imprint your singular perspective, like, it can be the most masterfully made piece of X, but if I don't see any of you in it, it's hard for me to relate to it. Like, it could be anybody, you know what I mean? Like, if you can figure out how to put your DNA into it, where it's like, oh, this is speaking to some singular, like, personal experience, or X, or like they're changing it in a way that is I've never seen before. Like, I saw a basket woven hat that had this super graphic, like, anime, not like, almost, I don't know, like anime almost looking like spider on top of it, and it's like I saw so many beautiful basket woven objects in this show, but like that one reached out and grabbed me because I've seen lots of amazing patterning that are super technically ambitious and rigorous, but that was so special. It was special to see something that like broke out of the ordinary. And like clearly that person loved, you know, I could just see like the references they were pulling from, and what excites them about moving through the world. Like I could almost picture like in their studio what kind of like graphic novels they might be looking at, or like what kind of, you know, like it felt like there's a person behind it. It wasn't just an object, you know? I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
If from all the body of work and all the artist statements that you read, is there one thing that you can think of that you think was lacking or could be improved? I know it's hard, I'm sorry.
Yeah. From the statements or from the work? Or both?
I guess
Okay.
the combination, like
Yeah.
just if anything stands out to you, you're like, this could have been improved upon in general as like a group, as a
As a group,
community
okay.
that we're like entering our work.
Well, I think this jury is special because you get to see the work in person, but for most juries, photography is so important. So when I looked at the work before I came, like I read through all the statements and I looked at all of the images, and there were pieces that like I definitely wouldn't have looked at twice, but then when I saw them in person, I was like, they just needed better lighting. Like that piece is incredible, or whatever. So that's one thing. And I liked the candidness of some of the statements. I actually felt like this group of statements that I read, or at least like the captions that I was able to see, weren't like, there wasn't that pretense of like, people were just kind of like, I felt like people were explaining the work in an authentic way in their voice, which was really strong. Yeah, I think contextualizing for somebody who is new to your work, why you're doing it and like what is what's compelling you to make is helpful. Yeah.
I'd like to verbalize one statement or one thing that she's mentioned several times. And that was that the level of work across the board was so high that limiting it down to what we can exhibit well was a real challenge.
Yeah.
And so I would say understand how high the bar is.
Yeah.
In this small, not regular place that we live in, so to speak. We set the bar very high, reach very high. I think that's a real strong impression that I got from your experience.
Yeah, no, the kind of technical rigor was so apparent, like in the submissions. I drew lots of things where I'm like, that's an amazing concept, but like, what happened? I want to see what you wrote about. That sounds great.
And I'd like to extend my thanks to everybody and anybody in this room who entered the show.
Yes.
Who's volunteered in any way, even if it's just to sit and greet people at the door or come in and paint, whatever it is. It takes all of this kind of community to make it something like this work. And we're all volunteers right along with you, so understand that. Sarah did 5 islands in 6 days.
Wow.
So she's seen Molokai, she's seen Kauai, she's seen Maui, Big Island, and of course Oahu. And visually juried pieces from Niihau. So it's
From Lanai.
From Lanai, I'm sorry, from Lanai. So it's really, Niihau if we get things in there, they'd be way different culturally. So understand what the effort that is taken on her part and by a number of people on each of those islands to be sure that this